December 11th, 1978. Des Plaines, Illinois. Maybe around 9 in the evening. Probably one of those flat Midwest winter nights where the cold just sits on everything and doesn't move. A 15-year-old boy named Robert Piest tells his mother he'll be right back. Just needs to step outside the pharmacy where he works, talk to a contractor about a summer job. $5 an hour. Won't take long. He walks out the door and never comes back. The contractor's name is John Wayne Gacy, 36 years old. Runs a successful construction company. Democratic precinct captain. Throws big neighborhood barbecues every summer. The whole street shows up. Volunteers at children's hospitals on weekends. Dresses up as a clown named Pogo. Makes balloon animals, paints kids' faces. His neighbors love him. His employees respect him. Politicians show up at his parties. When police run his name after Robert disappears, they find one prior conviction, a serious offense in Iowa, 1968. Served 18 months. Minor flag. They go to his house, ask some questions. Gacy is calm, cooperative, maybe a little irritated, basically just a busy man being bothered on a weeknight. He says he barely remembers the kid. They leave. They come back a few days later with a warrant. One of the officers walks toward the furnace vent. The heat kicks on. The smell hits him. He later says it was like walking into an unspeakable nightmare. They find 26 tragic discoveries in the crawl space under the house. 3 more elsewhere on the property. 4 in the river. 33 young men and boys, the youngest 15 years old, concealed under the home of a man who spent his weekends making children laugh. But how do you get here? How does someone become this? You have to go back, way back. Before we begin you up, good. Forget the noise outside for a second. Leave the cars, the sirens, and the stress at the door. Tonight, these stories will unfold slowly and respectfully, accompanied by gentle rain and subtle atmospheric visuals to create a calm space. Before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me what city you're in and what time it is there, and hit subscribe so we can stick together in the dark. We tell these dark stories not for entertainment or spectacle, and without any dramatization. We share them as a poignant reminder of the real people and real lives that were lost, and perhaps to help us recognize the warning signs that could prevent similar tragedies. For the best experience, lower your volume just a bit, enough to let the rain gently carry you off to sleep. Lights off? Okay, good. Take a breath, a real one. Let's go back. Way back. So let's go back to the beginning, maybe to March 17th, 1942, Chicago, Illinois. Probably to Edgewater Hospital, where a woman named Marion is giving birth to her second child and only son, basically to a moment that looks completely ordinary from the outside. Another baby, another family, another unremarkable entry into the world. The boy's father names him John Wayne, after the movie star, the cowboy, the symbol of American masculinity, broad shoulders, an iron jaw, and no room for weakness. John Stanley Gacy Sr. is an auto mechanic and World War I veteran who has very specific ideas about what a man is supposed to look like, how a man is supposed to carry himself, what a man is supposed to be. And from almost the first moment he looks at his son, he's disappointed. John Wayne Gacy does not look like John Wayne. He's soft. He's round. He gravitates toward his mother rather than his father, toward the kitchen rather than the garage, toward cooking and gardening and the things that Marion does rather than the things John Stanley does. He has a congenital heart condition that makes physical exertion difficult and dangerous, maybe causes blackouts, probably lands him in the hospital more than once as a child. And here's the detail that probably breaks something in a young boy's psychology. His father accuses him of faking it. Every time Gacy collapses, every time his heart misfires and his body fails him, John Stanley stands over his son in the hospital bed and tells him he's putting on a show, that he's weak, that he's doing it for attention. The harsh punishments start early. One of Gacy's earliest memories is being 4 years old. John Stanley severely punishes him for it. Not a spanking, something much darker. This is the template. This is what love looks like in the Gacy household. Maybe the only version of his father's attention that John Wayne ever reliably receives. Probably the thing that warps every relationship he tries to form for the rest of his life. The word his father uses most is sissy. Mama's boy, you'll probably grow up to be a complete disappointment. Said to a child, said repeatedly, said with the specific cruelty of a man who sees something in his son that frightens him and has decided that contempt is the appropriate response. Gacy later says he loved his father despite everything. Says it in interviews, says it on the record, says it with what sounds like genuine feeling. My dad was domineering, he explains. My dad drank a lot, and when he drank, he was deeply destructive to my mother and to me. But I never swung at my dad, because I loved him for what he stood for. Think about that for a second. A man who would go on to be responsible for the tragic fates of 33 people says he never raised a hand against the one person who probably deserved it. The rage went somewhere else entirely. There's another detail from this period that Gacy discloses much later, quietly, almost in passing. When he's 8 years old, a family friend, a contractor, starts what Gacy describes as inappropriate touching, a profound violation of trust. It goes on for some time. Gacy never tells his parents. Maybe he thinks they won't believe him. Probably he thinks his father will blame him. Basically, he absorbs it the way he absorbs everything in these years, by pushing it somewhere deep and covering it over and acting like it didn't happen. By his teenage years, Gacy is a paradox. On one hand, he's visibly struggling, the heart condition, the weight, the father who treats him like a disappointment, the secret he's carrying about what that family friend did to him. On the other hand, he's developing something else, maybe a compensatory hunger for approval, probably an almost desperate need to be seen as successful and respected and admired by the people around him. He's smart, he reads. He works hard at whatever he turns his attention to. He figures out early that performance is possible, that the person the world sees doesn't have to be the person you actually are, and he starts practicing this the way other kids practice sports. He drops out of college after a few months. Maybe it isn't the right fit. Maybe he can't focus. Probably he's still trying to figure out who he needs to become. He drifts for a bit, works various jobs, eventually ends up in Springfield, Illinois, managing a department for a shoe company. And here is where the mask starts to fit properly for the first time. In Springfield, Gacy joins the Jaycees, the Junior Chamber of Commerce, basically an organization for young professional men civic-minded and ambitious, the kind of group where you shake a lot of hands and give speeches and get photographed at charity events. And Gacy is extraordinary at it. He rises quickly, organizes events, builds relationships, becomes the kind of man that people point to and say, that guy is going places. He is charming in the specific way that some damaged people are charming, which is completely, attentively, giving you the feeling that you are the most important person in whatever room he's standing in. He meets a woman named Marlon Myers. Her father owns 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa, and in 1964, Gacy marries Marlon and moves to Iowa to manage the restaurants. For a brief period, maybe 2 or 3 years, this looks like the life John Stanley Gacy always wanted for his son. Stable job, wife, 2 children, respected member of the community. Rising in the Jaycees, same as in Springfield. John Stanley flies to Iowa to visit, and for maybe the first time in Gacy's memory, his father looks at him without contempt, tells him he's done well. It's the only time Gacy can remember his father being proud of him, and within a few years his father will pass away and Gacy will be in prison, and everything he built in Iowa will be gone. Because underneath the restaurants and the Jaycees meetings and the backyard barbecues, something else is happening. Gacy has started bringing young male employees back to the house, started using alcohol and promises of money to cross lines that should not be crossed. He knows what he's doing is wrong, probably, maybe rationalizes it somehow, basically operates on the assumption that his position and his charm will protect him from consequences indefinitely. In 1968, he's wrong. A 16-year-old boy tells his father that Gacy committed a profound violation against him. The father goes to police. Gacy is arrested, charged with a serious offense. He denies everything, claims the charges are politically motivated. The boy's father had opposed Gacy's bid to become president of the Iowa Jaycees, which is maybe the most brazen deflection in the history of criminal deflection. He even hires a young man to threaten the victim into not testifying, which gets discovered, which makes everything worse. He takes a polygraph, fails it, undergoes psychiatric evaluation. 2 doctors spend 17 days examining him and conclude antisocial personality disorder, unlikely to benefit from treatment. Behavior pattern will bring him into repeated conflict with society. And then they add one more line that should be engraved somewhere permanent. The most striking aspect of the test results is the patient's total denial of responsibility for everything that has happened to him. He can produce an alibi for everything. He pleads guilty to the charges, sentenced to 10 years at Anamosa State Penitentiary. The same day his wife files for divorce. He never sees her or his children again. In prison, Gacy does what Gacy does, which is perform. He becomes a model prisoner, organizes the kitchen, volunteers for programs, gets along with everyone. The parole board looks at this man who spent 18 months being exemplary and decides he's ready to return to society. He's released in June 1970, 18 months into a 10-year sentence. And here is the thing that should have stopped everything, but didn't. When Gacy moved back to Chicago and starts rebuilding his life, his Iowa convictions are sealed, expunged, legally invisible. He applies for jobs, meets people, presents himself as a successful contractor with a good record. and nobody checking his background finds anything to worry about. The information exists. It's just been put somewhere it can't be seen. He remarries in 1972, a woman named Carol, a divorcee with 2 kids of her own. They move into a ranch house in Norwood Park Township, a suburb of Chicago, one of those places where the lawns are kept and the neighbors wave and nothing bad is supposed to happen. Gacy starts PDM Contractors, his own construction company, and it thrives, maybe because he's genuinely good at the work, probably because he's relentless and charming and knows how to win bids and manage crews. He becomes a Democratic Party precinct captain, joins the local street lighting commission, starts performing at charity events and children's hospitals as Pogo the Clown, sometimes Patches the Clown, depending on the costume. He makes balloon animals. He paints faces. He attends political functions in full clown makeup and gets photographed with city officials and state representatives and eventually, incredibly, with Rosalind Carter, the First Lady of the United States, at the Polish Constitution Day parade in 1978, both of them smiling at the camera. His employees are mostly young men, teenagers and guys in their early 20s who need work and respond to a boss who seems generous and charismatic and occasionally offers to let them borrow his car or fronts them a little cash when they're short. Some of them will later tell investigators that he crossed professional boundaries with them, that he made comments, that something about him made them uneasy in a way they couldn't articulate at the time. His second wife notices that he's bringing young men down to the basement. She doesn't know what's happening down there. By 1976, she's seen enough to know she doesn't want to stay married to this man, and she leaves. Gacy lives alone after that. The house is his. The basement is his. The crawl space that runs beneath the entire foundation, low and dark, and smelling faintly of something that the neighbors occasionally mention, and that Gacy always explains away that's his too. He tells people it's a drainage problem, moisture from the soil, nothing to worry about. He's been concealing his tragic secrets down there since 1972. By the time Robert Piest disappears in December 1978, there are 26 of them, and there's no more room. So the first one happens in January 1972, maybe just days into the new year, probably one of those gray Chicago winters where the cold comes off Lake Michigan and settles into everything and the city just puts its head down and endures. Timothy Jack McCoy is 16 years old. He's traveling from Nebraska to Michigan, maybe visiting family, probably just a teenager on a bus doing what teenagers did in 1972, which is trust that the world is mostly safe and that strangers are mostly harmless. He has a layover at the Greyhound terminal in Chicago. Hours to kill, and there's a man in the terminal who strikes up a conversation, friendly and attentive, offers to let him stay the night rather than sleep in the station, says he'll drive him back in the morning. Timothy says yes. At the house, something happens that Gacy will later describe as a misunderstanding. He says he woke up to find Timothy standing over him with a kitchen knife, maybe having gone to make breakfast, probably just holding the knife the way you hold a kitchen knife when you're making eggs. Gacy says he panicked. A struggle ensued, and Timothy's life tragically ended in that room. Then he looks at the tragic outcome and realizes something. he experiences a deeply disturbing psychological reaction. The violence has done something to him that he doesn't have language for yet. Maybe something he's been circling around for years. Probably the thing that has been building since that family friend put his hands on an 8-year-old boy in Chicago, and nobody ever made it right. He conceals Timothy in the crawl space, pours lime over the tragic evidence, goes about his day. For 2 years, maybe he convinces himself it was an accident. Probably tells the story to himself as self-defense, as something that just happened, basically a one-time event that didn't mean anything about who he was. He remarries, starts the business, becomes Pogo the clown, shakes hands at JC's events and gets photographed with politicians and hosts neighborhood barbecues, where the whole street shows up and eats his food and thinks what a great guy. January 1974, 2 years almost to the day after Timothy McCoy, the second one. His name is John Butkovich, 17 years old, an employee of PDM Contractors, who has been arguing with Gacy about unpaid wages. Gacy invites him to the house to settle it, offers him a drink, mentions a magic trick. The trick involves handcuffs. Most people, when you tell them to put on handcuffs as part of a magic trick, comply, because most people cannot access the part of their brain that says, this is dangerous when someone they know and trust is standing in front of them being friendly and normal. Butkovich complies. AC takes his life, conceals him under the tool room floor of the garage. His wife and stepdaughters come home earlier than expected that evening, so he has to work fast, improvise the burial location, basically operate under time pressure, with a tragic secret in his garage while his family parks the car outside. He manages it. They never know. After Butkovich, the pace is slow for a while. Maybe one a year, probably less. Basically, Gacy still has some kind of brake on the thing, some mechanism of restraint that hasn't fully failed yet. But in 1975, his wife leaves, and after that the brake starts giving way. He's alone in the house now. The crawl space is his, the evenings are his, and the young men keep coming. Employees and runaways and hitchhikers and kids he picks up at the Greyhound Terminal or Bughouse Square or off the streets with the promise of a job or a drink or cash. The method is consistent. He brings them to the house. He is charming, relaxed, generous with alcohol. At some point, the handcuffs come out, presented as a trick, as a game, as something fun. And once the cuffs are on, the person wearing them understands what has happened, maybe screams, probably begs, and Gacy takes irreversible action and watches the light go out. He stuffs socks or underwear into their mouths first, to muffle the sound. He is methodical about this, careful in the way that a man running a construction business is careful, thinking about logistics, thinking about what can go wrong, basically treating these dark acts with the same organized attention he gives to remodeling contracts and crew schedules. After, he keeps the victims, sometimes for hours, sometimes longer, storing them under the bed or in the attic while he figures out the burial. He digs the trenches in the crawl space himself, sometimes stacking them in the same hole when he starts running out of room, pouring lime between layers to accelerate the process and suppress the smell. The smell is a problem he never fully solves. Neighbors mention it. Employees mention it. At various points over 6 years, people who enter that house notice something wrong in the air, and Gacy explains it away. drainage issues, moisture, pest problems in the walls. He installs better ventilation. He pours more lime. He opens windows. And people believe him, because why wouldn't they? He is the Democratic precinct captain. He is Pogo the Clown. He is the guy who throws the best barbecues on the block. In 1977, something happens that should stop everything. A 27-year-old man named Jeff Rignall agrees to get in Gacy's car. Gacy chloroforms him, drives him to the house, spends hours subjecting him to unspeakable trauma. Then he drives the unconscious man to Lincoln Park and leaves him on the grass. Rignall survives. He goes to the police. He describes his attacker in detail, describes the black Oldsmobile, eventually stakes out the area where he was picked up and identifies Gacy's car, follows it to the Norwood Park address, gives police everything they need. Gacy is charged with misdemeanor battery. He settles a civil suit for $3,000. The criminal charge goes nowhere. Jeff Rignall survived and told the police, and nothing happened. That same year, a 19-year-old man accuses Gacy of kidnapping and an unthinkable violation. An assistant state's attorney decides not to prosecute. The case is dropped. 2 separate accusers, 2 separate incidents. Nothing. By 1978, Gacy is taking lives at a pace that would have been unthinkable even to him a few years earlier. Multiple victims in a single month. He is 44 years old and successful and connected and apparently untouchable, and the crawl space is almost full. By mid-1978, there is genuinely no more room. The crawl space is at capacity. So Gacy pivots, maybe with the same practical problem-solving mindset he applies to everything, and starts disposing of the victims in the Des Plaines River. Maybe thinks the tragic evidence landed on a passing barge, probably loses sleep over this detail, in a way that he apparently does not lose sleep over the terrible acts itself. 4 victims are eventually recovered from the river. A 5th is never found. The last known victim is Robert Piest, 15 years old, working at a pharmacy in Des Plaines. Tells his mother he's going outside to talk to a contractor about a summer job paying $5 an hour. That contractor is Gacy. Gacy was remodeling the pharmacy and had spoken to some of the teenage employees about possible work with PDM. Robert goes outside to find him and never comes back. His mother waits 30 minutes, an hour. She calls the police that same night, maybe because she knows her son, probably because something in her understands that this is not a boy who would just not come home. The missing person report is filed within hours of the disappearance, which is faster than usual, which matters enormously for what comes next. Police run Gacy's name, find the Iowa serious offense conviction, go to his house that same evening, knock on the door, ask questions. Gacy answers calmly, says he barely knows the kid, says he was at the pharmacy to check on the job but didn't offer anyone specific employment. He is warm and cooperative and completely unrattled, basically a man with nothing to hide. They leave, but they don't stop. In the days that follow, investigators talk to former PDM employees who start telling them things about how Gacy would cross professional boundaries with young workers, about how he'd offer money and favors in exchange for inappropriate compliance, about how he'd make comments, dark jokes, things that felt off but that nobody had ever reported, because Gacy was the boss and the precinct captain and the guy with the clout. And then 2 employees mentioned something else, something specific. They say Gacy asked them, on separate occasions, to dig trenches in the crawl space, to spread lime down there. Told them it was for drainage. Investigators get a search warrant. First search turns up a class ring belonging to a previously missing teenager. A pharmacy receipt with Robert Piast's name on it. Syringes, police badges, highly disturbing films, licenses that don't belong to Gacy. He explains everything, has an answer for every item, is photographed leaving the police station that evening looking tired but composed, covering his face with his arm. Second search warrant. December 21st, 1978. Investigators go into the crawl space. The smell hits them before they find anything. One of them later says it was like crawling into a waking nightmare. They start digging in the marked sections of earth, and within minutes they have their tragic answer. They'd call for backup, then more backup. The Cook County medical examiner comes. They begin the process of uncovering what is essentially a concealed tragedy beneath a suburban ranch house in Illinois, and it takes days because there are 26 people down there, stacked in trenches, lime-covered, one of them so badly deteriorated, some of them so badly deteriorated that identification will take months. That evening, before the second search is complete, Gacy visits his attorney, Sam Amirante. He's been up for days running surveillance, talking to police, maintaining the performance. He sits down in Amirante's office and has a few drinks and starts talking and doesn't stop for hours. He tells Amirante everything, not in a confessional way, not breaking down, basically just narrating. Calm, detailed. He describes the dark events, the method, the concealments. He tells Amirante about the dark deception he perfected, how he'd tell victims it was a magic trick, and then cross the point of no return, tell them to watch what happened next. He says that at a certain point in the ordeal, when the struggle ended, he would feel a sense of peace. A sense of peace. The next day he tells a friend, "I've been a bad boy. I took the lives of 30 people, give or take a few." On December 22nd, police arrest him outside a McDonald's in Niles, Illinois on a minor drug charge, while the excavation of his house continues. He's put in a car and driven to the station. He is, by multiple accounts, completely composed, like a man who has been waiting for this moment for a long time and has already decided how he's going to handle it. 33 young men and boys, the youngest 15, the oldest 30. Most of them found in the ground beneath a house where Christmas lights were still strung along the eaves when the police arrived, still blinking on and off in the December dark while investigators crawled through the earth below, trying to understand the scale of what they were looking at. The house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue will be demolished eventually, the whole structure torn down to the foundation, and the foundation removed and the soil excavated, basically erased from the neighborhood, and a new house will be built on the lot. One of the workers involved in the demolition says afterward, "If the devil's alive, he lived here." The victims come out of the ground one by one. Each one is assigned a number. Each number eventually becomes a name, though some take months and some take years, and some, 5 of them, have only recently been identified. Decades later, through DNA technology that didn't exist in 1978, they were somebody's sons, somebody's brothers. Some of them had told someone where they were going that night. Some of them hadn't told anyone at all. The trial begins February 6, 1980. 14 months after the tragic discoveries start coming out of the ground, maybe long enough for the shock to have settled into something colder and more deliberate. Probably long enough for Gacy's legal team to construct the only defense available to a man who has already confessed. It's the only card left to play when your client has told his attorney in detail how he was responsible for the fates of 33 people, and told a friend he'd been a bad boy and drawn police a meticulous map of where the victims were concealed. You can't argue it didn't happen. You can't argue someone else did it. So you argue that the man who did it was not in control of his actions, that something broken in his psychology removed the possibility of choice, that John Wayne Gacy should be sent to a psychiatric facility rather than executed. The defense brings in 3 psychiatric professionals who testify that Gacy is a paranoid schizophrenic with multiple personality disorder. They describe the 4 identities he claims to inhabit: the hard-working contractor, the civic volunteer, the clown, and a figure he calls Jack Hanley, Bad Jack, the one he says committed the unthinkable acts while Gacy himself was absent. He wasn't there, his lawyers argue. Jack was there. John Wayne Gacy is a sick man who needs treatment. The prosecution's response is methodical and devastating. Lead prosecutor William Kunkel argues that everything Gacy did demonstrates the opposite of someone without control. He planned. He prepared. He bought lime in bulk and stored it in the crawl space before there were victims to put there, maybe months in advance, probably understanding exactly what he was going to use it for. He disposed of evidence. He maintained a functional business and a political career and a social life simultaneously with the dark events. He chose victims carefully, chose methods that left minimal evidence, chose locations and times that minimized the chance of being caught. Kunkel also points to 1968, the serious offense conviction in Iowa, the psychiatric evaluation conducted then, 12 years earlier, in which doctors concluded Gacy had antisocial personality disorder and warned explicitly that his behavior pattern would bring him into repeated conflict with society. Those doctors were right, and had their recommendations been heeded, Kunkel tells the jury, Gacy would not have been freed. The jury deliberates for 1 hour and 50 minutes. This is not a jury wrestling with doubt. This is a jury doing paperwork. Guilty on all 33 counts of the highest charges. Guilty of severe violations. Guilty of unforgivable crimes against a minor in reference to Robert Piest. At the time of conviction, it is the highest number of these tragic convictions ever returned against a single person in American history. A judge sentences Gacy to the ultimate penalty on 12 of the counts. The other sentences are stacked behind it, essentially meaningless given what's already been decided, but the prosecution wants every count on record. They want the full weight of what happened to exist somewhere official and permanent. Gacy is transferred to Menard Correctional Center in Chester, Illinois, and here, once again, he performs. He becomes a model prisoner, maybe because performance is the only mode he knows, probably because the alternative is sitting alone with what he's done. He corresponds voluminously, writes letters to anyone who will write back, gives interviews, maintains a kind of public presence from inside a prison cell that disturbs the families of his victims in ways that are difficult to articulate. He paints. This is the detail that follows him, the thing that gets mentioned in almost every account. John Wayne Gacy paints clowns. Pogo the Clown, over and over, the character he performed at children's hospitals, while his tragic secrets remained hidden beneath his floorboards. He also paints Disney's Seven Dwarfs, portraits of celebrities, landscapes. The paintings sell. People buy them, maybe out of morbid fascination, probably for the same dark reason that people watch true crime documentaries and buy books about these dark figures, which is the same reason you're listening to this right now. We are trying to understand something that resists understanding. One of his victims' mothers burns her son's painting at a public event. The gesture is photographed and published widely. It communicates something that words don't quite reach. For 14 years, Gacy fights his sentence through the courts. Every appeal rejected. Every stay of final consequence temporary. His attorneys argue the evidence, argue the insanity question again, argue procedural issues, basically exhaust every available mechanism, while the families of 33 lost young men wait for something that keeps not arriving. During this period, he gives dozens of interviews. He maintains his innocence in some of them, or at least maintains that the full story hasn't been told, that there are things people don't understand. He is charming in interviews the way he was always charming, engaging and apparently open while giving away nothing that actually matters. He discusses his childhood, his father, the profound trauma. He discusses his sexuality. He discusses the victims in ways that make the people interviewing him feel physically ill. In one recording, he describes the unthinkable acts in the same flat administrative tone he probably used to discuss lumber costs and remodeling timelines. Not because he's suppressing emotion, because there is no emotion to suppress. Robert Piest is recovered from the Des Plaines River in April 1979, 4 months after he disappeared. He'd been thrown from the bridge like the others, weighted with something to keep him down. But the spring thaw changes the river and eventually gives him back. He's identified and returned to his family and buried, maybe finally, probably with the particular exhausted grief of people who have been waiting for months for news that was always going to be this news. His mother, Elizabeth Piest, attends every day of the trial. She is there when the verdict comes in. She is there when the sentences are read. She has said in interviews that she wanted to look at Gacy, wanted him to know that she was there, that she was a person, and her son was a person, and that the full weight of what he did was being witnessed. She outlives him. 5 of Gacy's victims remain unidentified until decades after his final consequence. Their names recovered only through advances in DNA technology that didn't exist in 1978. The last of these identifications happens in recent years, 40-plus years after the victims were found, which means there are families who spent the better part of their adult lives not knowing, who received phone calls or letters or visits from investigators when they were already old, if they were still alive at all, telling them that the son or brother or friend who disappeared in 1975 or 1976 had been found in a crawl space in Norwood Park, had been there the whole time. The process of identifying these victims involves reaching out to the public, asking families of young men who disappeared in the Chicago area in the 1970s to submit DNA samples. It involves genetic genealogy and forensic anthropology and cold case investigators who have spent careers on this single case. It involves a level of sustained institutional commitment to those who were lost that is genuinely moving when you look at it directly. This refusal to let the unidentified remain anonymous. This insistence that the number 33 represents 33 specific people and not an abstraction. In 1994, the courts run out of reasons to wait. May 10th, Stateville Correctional Center in Joliet. Gacy's last meal is fried shrimp, a bucket of KFC chicken, French fries, and a pound of strawberries. Maybe the meal of a man asserting one final piece of control over something, probably just what he wanted to eat. He is 52 years old. He has been awaiting his final consequence for 14 years. The final consequence is carried out by the state's designated procedure. It does not go smoothly. The process encounters a severe complication partway through the process, maybe due to the chemicals crystallizing in the line, probably something nobody anticipated or prepared for adequately. There's a delay. The curtain separating the chamber from the witness room is closed while the medical staff deals with the problem. It takes 18 minutes from the point the final consequence begins to the point Gacy is officially gone, significantly longer than it should. Several of the victims' family members are in the witness room. They have waited 16 years for this. They watch the curtain close and then reopen. Some of them later say the delay made it worse. Some say nothing made it better, regardless. His last words are reported as a final, unapologetic insult. Maybe apocryphal, probably accurate, basically the most Gacy thing he could possibly say. He is laid to rest at Maryhill Cemetery in Niles, Illinois, not far from where he lived and committed his dark acts. The grave is unmarked for years, maybe because his family wants some protection from vandalism, probably because nobody involved wants to deal with what a marked grave would become. Eventually, there are reports that his family has had his site emptied and cleared, that the grave is now empty, that even the physical fact of his burial has been erased, though the details of this are disputed and unclear. The house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue is gone. Demolished in 1979, the lot cleared, the soil excavated, everything removed. A new house was built. People live in it. The neighborhood looks the same as it did before, maybe because that's what neighborhoods do, probably because the alternative is leaving a permanent wound in the streetscape. One of the construction workers who helped tear the place down said, "If the devil's alive, he lived here." And the question that remains, maybe the one that makes this story impossible to fully close, is how. Not how did he do it. We know how he did it in exhaustive detail. How did it go on for 6 years? How did so many young men disappear and the pattern not emerge? How did 2 separate accusers go to the police in 1977 and nothing happened? How did a convicted, dangerous individual get his record sealed and walk back into a world full of young men with no flag, no monitoring, nothing? Part of the answer is the era, pre-DNA, police departments in different jurisdictions that didn't share information, missing persons reports for young gay men that weren't always taken seriously, maybe filed and forgotten, probably never connected to each other because the prevailing assumption was that these men had simply chosen to disappear, had moved away or changed their lives or didn't want to be found. Part of the answer is what Gacy understood about visibility. He made himself the most visible possible version of a respectable man. The clown costume, the political connections, the neighborhood barbecues, these weren't incidental to the crimes. They were infrastructure for the crimes. They were the thing that made people look at him and see a pillar of the community instead of what was actually there. And part of the answer is something more uncomfortable. The victims were mostly young men who existed at the margins of the world Gacy moved through. Gacy moved through. Runaways, kids hustling for work, young gay men who couldn't always go to the police when something happened to them without risking exposure of their own lives. The people least likely to be searched for aggressively, least likely to generate the kind of sustained institutional response that might have connected the dots earlier. Gacy knew this. He understood who could disappear and who couldn't. He understood which absences would be investigated and which would be filed and forgotten, and he selected accordingly for 6 years with the same careful practical intelligence he brought to running a construction company. 33 names are on the record, maybe more that never made the record. The crawl space was full. So that's John Wayne Gacy. And I know what sits with you after a story like this, maybe the same thing that sits with everyone who gets to the end of it. Probably not the crawl space or the clown costume or even the 33 names, though those stay too. What sits with you is the barbecue, the neighbors eating his food in the backyard, the children at the hospital laughing at Pogo, the politician shaking his hand, the whole machinery of a normal life running perfectly on top of something that had no right to exist. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was standing in the light on purpose, because the light was the best possible cover. That's the thing about this story that doesn't let go. It's not a monster in the dark. It's a monster at the neighborhood block party, refilling your drink, asking about your kids, waving goodbye from the driveway. Remember the 33, not him. If you're still with me, still listening in the dark, still on this road with me, drop a balloon emoji in the comments. I want to know who made it this far tonight. And if these stories help you sleep, hit subscribe. There are more to tell. There always are. The rain keeps falling. Rest now